Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dr. Gotro, and today we have the pleasure of hearing from Kristine Quinn. And Kristine Quinn is a faculty member in the Elementary Bilingual Education Department at Cal State Fullerton, and her expertise is in the area of art education. Welcome, Kristine.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for having me. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you had a great day, whether you were in the classroom or whatever it is that you were doing. Tonight, we're going to be talking about incorporating more time for the arts in the classroom. And we're going to look at it through really a different lens than what you might traditionally think of as the arts. So we're going to give a little bit of background. I want to talk about a couple theorists, and then I also want to share some activities with you. And I do want us to be creating some art together tonight. So I hope that doesn't scare you in any way. The nice thing is that you're in the privacy of your home, so no one will be judging. But I've invited everybody to get at least some paper and at least a pencil or a pen. If you have any other supplies lying around, if you have Sharpies or crayons or markers, those would be great as well. We're not going to do anything too scary, I promise. So tonight we're going to be talking about the importance of the arts as not just something that's on the side or something that's saved for Friday afternoon, but that really it is a core subject. One of the things that I'm always reminding my teacher candidates to think about is that the arts do have state standards. They do have a framework. It is a required subject with required minutes in the curriculum. So we really have to keep that honored, that it is a core subject. It's not something extra. But today I really want to focus on the benefits of using arts, not just as a subject, but really as a lens, as a way to focus and to look at life through a new lens. So we're going to talk about how it is a motivation tool, how it strengthens and enhances learning. We want to talk about how it can sometimes unlock academic potential for some kids who might struggle academically otherwise. And we really want to talk about that idea of unleashing creativity that really is in all of us as humans. We're born as beings to be creative. And often we forget about that as we get older. And unfortunately, we get taught out of our natural creativity and our curiosity as we get older. So that's where we're going tonight. And then at the end, I've got a nice set of resources for you. I know that that's always important when I'm looking at things. I always want to be able to go back and to look at some of these resources. So here's your last chance. Go ahead and gather some materials if you haven't already, and come right back. And we're just going to kind of keep plugging along. Cynthia, if anybody has any questions as we go along, please feel free to type them right into that chat window. Cynthia's going to help moderate, and she will let me know if there's any questions. So please feel free. So I hope you have some materials. I didn't give you very much time, but you can keep looking as I'm talking. I really want you to think about using the arts again as a lens in which to see the world. So if we think about our traditional classroom, and we're focusing a lot tonight on the elementary school classroom, we tend to see that the arts are centered around crafts, holiday trinkets, projects. It's usually a product that is created by somebody else, that has guidelines, it's outcome-based, and the product it has an expected product. And it's usually teacher-led. Usually that is how many of our students experience the arts. And it's been that way for many years. But if we think about moving to this new way of looking at the world and as a way to unleash creative ingenuity, and I love all those words together, unleashing creative ingenuity. So here we're not really talking so much about the end product, but we really are talking about the process and the thought and the experiences that we have while we are creating. This new way of looking at things is student driven, and it might not have a particular product that you have envisioned or that you have in mind. It is exploratory. Students are using their imaginations and experimenting, and you still might have a goal as far as a product, but often those outcomes are not what you expect. So it's a new way of looking at things. If you look at the standards for the visual and performing arts, creative expression is one of the threads that runs through every grade level in the visual and performing arts framework. And it really is how we see the world through artistic eyes. How do we take in our environment? How do we make decisions about our creative process, and how does that affect our cognition? So if we're thinking about it as creative expression, hello, welcome. And hi. Okay, so if we think about a creative expression, as opposed to an art period on Friday afternoon, creative expression is throughout the curriculum. It's not just a product. It is inclusive because it is individual. It is naturally differentiated because it comes from the self. It's accessible for everybody for those same reasons. It's equitable for those same reasons. And it's about building personal meaning. There's many studies out there, and they've been done for decades. I have one particular study here that tells us that people who are involved in the creative process on a regular basis have less mental health issues and less physical health issues. So if we think about art as a catalyst to a healthy lifestyle, they're saying that it even might be as important as nutrition and exercise, especially when we're looking at the aging process and Alzheimer's. There's a lot of new research going on in this area about how important the creative process is. So creative expression is not just about creating a product, it's about promoting curiosity, it's about using your imagination. And through all of this, we learn to use a lot of our problem-solving skills, because we never know what is expected, and we run into things where we have to make decisions, and we have to solve problems artistically as well. So the time has come already. We're ready to get creative. I want you to enjoy this time, and I want you to simply make marks on a paper. And if you are not feeling as inspired to be creative right now, hopefully by the end you will be. So think about this little girl here who needs nothing more than a cardboard box to take her in that rocket ship. So about using creativity and imagination. One of the things that I do in the beginning of my classes, and I've done this with adults and children alike, is called Hart Maps. And this is a great way to start kids in this idea of using symbols and colors and things to represent feelings and thoughts and emotions. So Georgia Hurd wrote this great book called Hart Maps. And I've got a link there if you'd like to link onto it. And really, it's a way to build creative expression. It's reflective, self-reflective, and we certainly get to use our artistic expression as well. So Georgia Hurd, here is her book, Awakening the Heart. And look at the title of it, Exploring Poetry in Middle and Elementary and Middle School. So if you're interested in that book, I've also got it as a link at the end. Here's a way to use images, visual images, to spur creative writing, to spur poetry. So I want to start, and if you have your paper, I want you to take your paper and I want you to draw a heart. And you can draw it as big as your paper is. And I want you to think about a few things here. And there's a lovely list up here. You don't have to think about all of them, but you could pick a few. What makes you happy? What memory is your favorite? What things or objects are important to you, and who is important to you? And as students delve deeper into their own personal thoughts, then you can ask things like, what secrets are in your heart? And I have a couple examples here, just in case. Hello, if you just joined us, thank you for joining us. We are creating right now our own heart maps, and here's some examples. And I put some examples up here using different mediums so that I want you to think about all the different possibilities in your classroom. One of the things that teachers have to face is the idea that materials for art are expensive, and they might not be always accessible. So here's a sample with just crayons. Here's a sample with some watercolors and some crayons. Here's a collage sample. And you can see that small children can do this, and my adult students do this as well. So I'm going to give you a few minutes, and I'm just going to be kind of quiet in the background here. And I want you to think about creating your own heart map for a moment. Cynthia, that means you too. So I'm just going to take my paper, I'm going to draw my heart on it. I'm going to divide it, use some words and some images. And you might be asking yourself, I don't know how she wants it to look. How should I divide it? What if I don't use color? What if I just use black and white? Listen to the conversation that's in your head right now and try to quiet all of those voices of doubt and that it has to look like some sort of finished product. Try to get those ideas out of your head.
I wonder if you could place the questions back.
Yes, I would be happy to do that.
I've got my heart, but oh, there we go.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you so much.
So mostly we're doing words and maybe pictures as well?
It depends on what you as the creative person decides.
Okay.
Hello, small person in the back. Hi, I see you. When we start using those creative energies, if we're not used to using them a lot, then we have constant questions for ourselves about what it's supposed to look like, or what the intended outcome is. So one of the hardest things as an adult about jumping into our creative energies is just quieting all of those questions in our mind. So you might have just a rough sketch. All I have right now is a rough sketch, and I'm not done yet, but as we're going through the webinar, one of the things that I know, research tells us that sometimes when we are working in a artistic way, that sometimes it helps us to focus on other things. We're going to talk about Zentangling and doodling in just a bit, and I'll tell you a little bit of what the research says about that. So if you're not done with your Hart map, that's okay. I hope you're not. My friends accuse me of being a speed artist, but not even I am done yet. So we will keep working on that. And even if you're a small person in the background, you could do a Hart map too. So for right now, I'm going to move forward, but keep thinking about that. So I want to jump into a little bit of some of the important people in the field of arts in the classroom and creativity. And Elliot Eisner certainly is one of the giants in the field of arts education. He's no longer with us, but he had great impact on the field of education in general, and cognition, and particularly the arts and cognition as well. He started off as a high school teacher in Chicago and ended up getting his doctorate and becoming a professor at Stanford University. And he really focused a lot of his research on how the arts help us learn about life around us and what's important to us in regards to the quality of life that we decide. So he's got this wonderful 10 lessons the arts teach that I always keep in my classroom. And you can click, we're going to click here for a second. It's going to come up. And here we go. So this is something that you could print and put on your wall in your classroom, or put on your mirror in the morning, and kind of be reminded about why it's important to incorporate the arts, not only into the curriculum, but really into our lives. So a few of these jump out at me. I won't read all 10 to you now. You can do that on your own time, but a few of these things really jump out to me. Number 5 in particular, the arts make vivid the facts that neither words in their literal form nor numbers exhaust what we can know. The limits of our language do not define the limits of our cognition. So if we're thinking about the kids in our classroom, there's a lot of children in our classroom who might not have the language skills or the mathematical skills, but they have the artistic and creative skills. And if we can think about tapping into that creativity and that artistic perception that they have, we really can perhaps maybe tune into their learning more specifically. There are a lot of children who do learn through creativity, and I know this because I have one myself. She really does better when things are presented in a way that are visual, and she can look at through different lenses and different sides of it, and understand it conceptually. That's something that she needs as well. So I love this list, this 10 things that are important for what the arts bring to us. The arts teach children that problems can have more than one solution and that questions can have more than one answer. When I look at this list, I really see not only a list of what is helpful for children in the classroom, but what is helpful for humans in life. I really think that these are important things. Number 8 is also one that stands out to me. The arts help children learn to say what cannot be said. So much of our day is focused on language, and we're having them speak, and we're having them read, and we're having them write, and we're having them listen. But there's many things that really just cannot be said with words. And so he says here, when children are invited to disclose what a work of art helps them feel, they must reach into their poetic capacities to find the words that will do the job. I really love that idea of poetic capacities. it's something that we don't often think about. So Elliot Eisner is certainly an important part of arts in education. I invite you to look at his things further on as well. Another theorist that I want to talk about, you've probably heard about habits of mind. It seems to have kind of a resurgence right now that's gained popularity, and when I'm visiting classrooms, I'm seeing a lot of evidence that the habits of mind are being studied or used or talked about. So Art Costa and Ben Akalik and their team of researchers a few decades ago started looking into these life skills that help us to be problem solvers and effectively operate in the world. And they called them habits of mind. And one of the ideas about habits of mind is to really help us to be mindful, right? To focus on how we operate, how we process, where our strengths are, what sort of things that we need to work on. So again, I have linked to you just the description. If you haven't seen this before, then you can keep this up for later and perhaps use it into your classroom. 16 habits of mind. I use this with my teacher candidates in the first semester of their multiple subject credential program, and we look at these things and we say, what sort of strategies do I use all the time, and what sort of strategies might I be lacking? So it really is a great tool, self-reflective tool for children and adults to really look at how do they learn? How do they use their time? How do they look at problems? How do they respond to things? And again, I love to use this kind of as a self-reflective tool to say, I know that persistence, the very first one, persistence is something that I constantly work at. And it's an important life skill. So when we're thinking about these habits of mind that help us in life, there is one more person that I want to introduce you to. Lois Hetland came out of Harvard University, and she kind of was perhaps maybe inspired by habits of mind, but she looked at specifically what habits of mind do artists use? What sort of things do artists and creative people use? And she put these into the studio habits of mind. And here you can see the 8 studio habits of mind. So again, not only does this help us to understand who we are as creative beings, it helps us to understand who our students are as artistic people, and it helps us to think about goals and ways that we use our own abilities to really stick with a project, to work through problems, to not give up, to persevere, and how all of these things are connected. So I've got a link there, but I also just put it right into the next slide so that you could kind of read through it with me. And take a moment, kind of look at these studio habits of mind. I'm going to give you a few minutes to read through it, and I'll be quiet. And I want you to think about one or two that really stand out to you. Do they stand out because this is something that you're really great at? Or does it stand out because it's something that sometimes maybe you struggle with? Perhaps when you're doing this, you can also pick one or two of your students that you have in mind and try to match them up with one of the studio habits of mind. So take a moment, look through these things, and kind of self-reflect. Where do you see yourself? So if we were sitting in a classroom together, here's the time when I would say, find somebody across the room who might share the same habit of mind that you're thinking about, or I would say turn to your partner, I would say share. Since we're on a webinar, we have the chat window. So I invite you now, if you would like to share, if somebody can think of one that stands out to them and share why this one stands out to you. And we will look to see if we can see some comments coming up on the chat window.
If you'd rather use your microphone, you're welcome to do that as well. All you need to do is mouse over your picture in the screen on the right, and then change mute to click on the mute to unmute, and then you have access to the microphone.
And I would love to hear from you, otherwise I get pretty lonely sitting here by myself. I see Sue. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
Who's talking? That's good. Sue, since you're there,
Uh-huh.
do any of these call to you?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think about a habit of mine that I use. Artists. Well, it's I actually teach for the Meet the Masters art program in
Wonderful.
classrooms. Yeah, and I was a former classroom teacher. Can you hear me all right with this microphone?
I can hear you great, Sue. Thank you.
Oh, good. And so my teaching art lately has been very directed. You know, there are lessons that are imitating master artists and,
Right.
and very directed. And the
Right.
kids are learning about the master artist and sort of imitating the style.
Right.
So I wonder how this fits in. As far as habits of the mind, I guess learning to interact as an artist. What does that say down on the bottom? Understand art community. Interact with other artists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Certainly.
You're wondering how that that happens in my own life?
Yeah. What about you as a creative being?
Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm stuck on that one.
So I can tell you that one that I'm working on right now in my own life and where I am in my path is stretching and exploring. So I'm really trying to force myself, if I look at this, learning to reach beyond one's capacities, to explore playfully without a preconceived plan, and to embrace the opportunity to learn from mistakes. And that is something right now that I'm trying to embrace more fully. And if we think about it, just even in terms of connecting it to the Meet the Masters program, which is a wonderful program, and it introduces art and artists to a lot of our kids, and we appreciate the people who are bringing that to the classrooms, because often it's volunteers. So thank you for doing that. But it really is that idea about, like you said, they're learning to copy the artist, and there's a particular expected outcome. So here, stretching and exploring, how might their art look different? How might their creations be different if they were able to explore playfully without a preconceived plan? How would those things differ? And I would love to see the next step, the expansion. So starting with the Meet the Masters plan, and then opening it up for the second stage of that art process, where now we have learned about the artist, we've looked at their art, we've practiced some of the skills and strategies that they've used. Now let's use some of those skills and strategies to create your own work of art. My experience is that children are much less afraid of moving forward in their creativity than adults. And right now I teach adults. I'm in elementary school classrooms a lot as well, but I mainly teach adults. And as adults, we're usually pretty self-judging, and we stop ourselves and we think, what will others think? So those are some of the ideas about stretching and exploring. Anybody else that would like to add to that? Okay, we're going to keep going. Please feel free. Did anybody chat in the window, Cynthia?
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, you actually had a lot of activity going on in the chat window.
Oh, good, good, good.
So there is Andy. She says, side note, future art teacher here. Ellen Disanayaki, I don't know how to say the name. Ellen D is another really interesting art education resource who connects how we make art to being a biological mandate.
Oh, cool. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so that's a good resource if anyone else is interested. And then
Can you
Jennifer.
spell that last name, or can they see the chat window? Am I the
Yes.
only one who can't see the chat window?
Yes, they can see the chat window. Dissanayake. Then Jennifer M says she thinks she falls more into the observed state of mind category.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see. Jennifer M also says, thanks for hosting this presentation. Oh, this is very interesting. And then Joseph says he falls into the stretch and explore state of mind.
Me too, Joseph. Mm-hmm. Or I'm trying to. Yeah. Awesome. So you can see how both the habits of mind developed by Costa and the studio habits of mind kind of support each other and work together. Again, I think that you can go back to these slides at a later date and be able to click on those links. So we've talked a little bit about theorists, and I really want to move into the idea of practice because we only have 1 hour together. So I want to focus on 4 ideas that are not necessarily a product. So we're not going to be looking at, here is an art project for you. We're going to be looking at, here are some strategies, here are some activities that students can be incorporating into their day in multiple ways, and it doesn't just have to be during the art class. So we're going to deconstruct them a little bit. We're going to practice them a little bit. We're going to, again, do some creating. I have a lot of samples for you, a lot of children's samples for you. And again, we're focusing on arts as a new lens, as a way to process, to synthesize, to analyze, not just to create a product. Okay, so let's keep going. If you are of a certain age, when you went to school, you had a peachy. And now they have all these wonderful folders with all kinds of designs on them. But when several of us, many of us of a certain age were going to school, we only had a peachy. And it was a very popular thing to decorate your peachy with these kind of fun doodling designs. And when during that time, we were often told that if we were doodling, that we were distracted and not paying attention in school. In reality, the research that has come out in the last decade or so has told us that it actually helps children and adults to focus. I'm not saying every single person out there focuses better with it, but many people do. So one of the things that they are finding is that it helps, it provides this kind of calming meditative state. So if you're somebody who suffers from any sort of anxiety, if you get nervous, if you are somebody who has test anxiety, perhaps maybe this idea of doodling might help you increase your self-confidence, and it helps to just kind of, again, cultivate this idea of being in the moment and mindful of what is going on right at that moment instead of worrying about what's coming up in the future. So they're finding that it improves student concentration. It can certainly help to build motor coordination. So if we think about children with writing utensils, pens and pencils and crayons and things, as they are young and they start to learn those fine motor skills. In the classroom, we really focus a lot on the writing part. But there's so much hand and eye coordination and fine motor skill coordination that can be built through doing something like these intricate designs. I'm going to show you in a minute what they look like. Again, we are seeing evidence that it promotes a well-being, and that it really does help to look at things mathematically, and certainly with cognitive challenges. I have an article here, this research article, if you would like to look at that it talks about the research behind the doodling. For right now, I'm not going to click on that, but I'm going to go to the next session because it's time to create again. So that's the fun part. And how many of you have seen this type of design either on somebody's folder, or maybe your mom does that, or I know that my mom used to doodle when she was on the phone when I was growing up. Do you have any experience either doodling yourself or somebody in your life that has done it? So just put in your chat window right now if you are a person who likes to doodle, or if you know somebody who does.
All right, they're typing. And yes, people doodle when they're on the phone. They do that all the time when they're listening to long lecture classes.
Yes.
Or for
I do it when
unknown
I'm watching a
reasons.
webinar too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people do it. So we know that if we embrace that as teachers and understand that a lot of people focus better when they're doing that, then we can get away from the idea that it's distracting and that they're not paying attention. So what I want to do is I want to teach you a really easy way to start doing this. And if you've done this, then your designs can be more intricate. And then I have a 3-minute, yes, we do have time for it, a 3-minute YouTube kind of instructional video. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to start with a square. And if you have a piece of paper, you can begin doing this. I'll get you set up with the very basics, and then we'll jump over to our YouTube connection. So we're just going to start with a square, and I have a large piece of paper, so I gave myself 4 squares just because I can. And the first thing that you're going to do, and I do this with children, there's a particular language of the discipline when it comes to doodling, and specifically Zentangling, which was actually a branded doodling. So we're going to start with threads, and we're going to simply connect from one corner to the next corner. It doesn't have to be a straight line, it can be a wavy line. And we're going to connect the other corner this way. So what that does for us as artistic people or creative humans is it gives us a designated space. One of the most frightening things, especially to children and certainly to adults who would say the words out loud that I hate to say, I'm not an artist. White paper, the white canvas is very threatening. So we're going to take small squares. We're going to take small sections divided by threads, and that's going to give us 4 quadrants for us to explore some patterns. And on this next slide, you're going to see that there's a sample of patterns. Now, if you go on Pinterest, or if you go on Google and you Google Zentangle designs, you're going to find that there are an endless amount of samples out there of designs that you don't even have to come up with your own if you don't want to. So let's take 3 minutes right now, and let's click over. We'll probably have to skip an ad. Clearly hopefully this is sped up. I do not expect you to work with this speed. Simply about filling the space with repetitive lines in some sort of pattern. That particular pattern right there is called noodles. So if you would like to begin your patterns in some of your designs right now, maybe you saw something that you liked there, go ahead and start doing that on yours. I'll begin working on mine too. Try not to work too fast. It's not about speed. It's about repetitive motion. It's about mindfulness. So hopefully, maybe in one of your quadrants, or maybe two or three of your quadrants, you might have started doing some patterns. I've started doing some patterns here. And again, I'm not done. I want to be done. But we are just developing some patterns. Is anybody brave and would like to show their beginnings? If you would, you can turn on your video and show us what you have. Although, this is a safe place and you don't have to share your work if you don't want to. Here's Sue. I see you, Sue. Great job. Look at that.
Can't tell whether I'm showing it or not.
You are. I see it. I see it. Good, good. And you were brave, Sue, because you chose a large space to work with.
Oh, large pictures. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of directed. So, you know, like you said, you're trying to let them be free and sort of doodle and do their own thing, but then there's a place for giving them some direction. I kind of struggle with that because you're right, Meet the Masters is very directed. And when I return to the classroom, it's sort of my way of getting back into teaching, and eventually I'll go back to the regular classroom.
Right.
It'll be kind of a happy medium, I guess, between the two.
Right. So, Sue, then you're going to do things in your classroom, like you're going to provide samples for them to play with, and you're going to think about what you're teaching in your curriculum. Perhaps in math, you're looking at parallel lines and vertical lines. So you're going to find patterns where they're going to practice that. Or maybe you're looking at things in science where you're looking at cycles, different types of cycles. So maybe you'll find some of these patterns, such as, I mean, I can look at some of these patterns on here. Can you see my mouse as I'm moving on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I look at it like this, I can see this idea of patterns, right? So I could tie it in specifically to my science content. Maybe I'm studying natural habitats or leaves or things, so I can find things like this pattern here that looks like a leaf pattern. So there is a way to take this idea and be somewhat structured. And there's nothing wrong with a structured lesson, because part of being creative is also having strategies and skills so that you feel confident enough to be creative on your own as well. So I'm not discounting the idea of directed lessons, but expanding that that's not the only type of art that you do. Mm-hmm. So as they have more experience with these, they start to build them themselves. And again, with children, I start with, if you look in a catalog and you can find Zentangling kits, they start with tiles, and the tiles are no bigger than like 3x3 tiles that they start doing this with. And then they end up with much larger things once they have the skills and the strategies. So there is a way to direct, and we want to focus on making that a step and not the end product. A step to build skills so that they feel more confident to be creative on their own. Now here's something where they can do these things at any point in time during the day. And quite often teachers have something, you know, I'm done, teacher, what do I do? Here's a great way for them to work through this. I want to skip ahead because we're kind of already running short on time. Find a resource that you like. Here's a couple resources I've used. I have the Zentangle books, and I also have the Totally Tangled books. Those have a lot of fun patterns and more specific instruction about how to get kids moving in the right direction. So find a resource that you like. Another extension of this comes from my friend Anne, who was actually the keynote speaker at our last Arts at the Center conference in January at Cal State Fullerton. And he focuses on circle painting. It's a little bit different than doodling and Zentangling because it's built around symmetry. So here's another thing that you can do with children. And again, it's just about being creative and building patterns. So if you have another piece of paper, here's kind of some of the examples of what it can end up with. I like to start with a paper plate because, as you can see, then that idea of circular shapes stays consistent, and especially for smaller children. The younger the child, the larger the plate. And that seems weird, but it's the same sort of thing with the pens. The smaller the hands, fine motor skills aren't developed yet, they have larger pens. So with little ones, I would start with the larger plates, and as they get older, then you can move to the smaller plates. So if you do not have a paper plate, I didn't tell you to get one, would you draw a circle on your paper? Just draw a circle. This is different than Zentangling because Zentangling focuses first on the square. Now we're going to focus on the circle. And I want you to put some sort of image in the center, and it doesn't even have to be anything more than a circle itself. Maybe it's just going to be a circle. And we use that idea of doodling, that idea that we just keep building symmetrical patterns that move away from the center. The reason why I like to use paper plates for this is because I can easily rotate the paper plate. So for children, that's an easy thing. So you can see I just added triangles, and now you might say, oh, it looks like a sun, but it's not going to for long because I'm just going to keep building, moving around that center shape. Right now I'm just working in black and white, but Children love color. And just keep adding shapes, and keep focusing on the symmetry.
And by symmetry, do you mean repeated shapes?
Yeah, we really want to focus on radial symmetry here. So always going back to the center. Now, don't judge too closely because I've not got complete symmetry. But as you can see, we're talking about radial symmetry. Yes, you got it too. So we want to keep our kids focused on building around that center. And again, if you want to direct this, you could give clues such as, now I want you to use a line. Next, I want you to use a curve. Next, I want you to use a spiral. So there's many ways that we can look at this, but we want kids to be able to create, to use their own imaginations, to come up with their own designs, to feel confident in their own creativity, and to end up with works of art. They're quite fascinating. Now, as you can tell, you could do with markers, you could do crayons, you could do pencils, you could go back in with paint. So you start to see things like this. So you can work on a small scale, and then you can see the PowerPoint where these are some of my teacher credential students last year that were working on huge murals, and then they ended up adding color as well. So it really is a community project. It's collaborative. You start to build on each other's designs, which creates this amazing sense of community. And it's a shared ownership. So after we've been practicing this for a while, we know that it's okay for one of our colleagues to come in and add something to our design, and it's okay for us to add something to somebody else's design. It's that community shared vision. So it's just a tiny little snippet. If you are interested in circle painting, he has a fantastic website, circlepainting.org. You can go and visit. You can ask him to come into your classrooms. Tell him Kristine and Cynthia sent you from Cal State Fullerton, and he'd be more than thrilled to share his ideas. He also does full day workshops as well if you'd like to go be part of that. So here's an easy way for kids to work on their creative processes in a way that is non-threatening, that's collaborative, that builds mathematical skills, and that stretches us. You can see some examples here where color has been added. And we also know that this pattern, this idea of circle painting, has been around for as long as humans have been creating. And we can see it through many cultures, the patterns through Aztecs and Native Americans and Roman mosaics, and we see it through many societies. So the important part of this, again, is the mindfulness, right? So when my students are creating in the classroom, what happens is it gets very, very quiet, almost painfully quiet, because they really do focus, get into the mindset, the idea of breath. If you are a yoga person, or if you're not a yoga person, or if you a meditation, the idea of breath connecting all of it, you can just feel it as they're creating in the classroom. And that's true of not just adults, but children as well. I've seen it as well. Any questions before we move on to the next thing? I want to wrap up with learning journals, and I wanted to spend more time than 5 minutes on it. Any questions?
I think it's going great. Thank you so much. We have so many tools to work with now. So look forward to hearing about the journals now.
Great. Okay. So one of the things that we have incorporated at Cal State Fullerton for our pre-service teachers is that every student gets a learning journal. And you might have seen, again, popularity grow recently in the past decade or so about learning journals. If you want to find any ideas for them, simply go on Pinterest. There's a million of them. But it really is a place for students to keep their work. Often you think about, you create something and then what do you do with this one piece of paper? So a journal is a place where it's a collection and we can see growth and it's used as a learning tool. It really helps dive into depth and complexity as students are using the art processes to learn content. And again, this idea of encouraging experimentation where there is not necessarily an end product in mind. It can be directed, perhaps maybe you're exploring with, particular materials or a particular topic, but that the end product really is about their self-reflective learning. And I'm going to show you some examples here. You have to realize that when you're working in your journal, that is the process, that sometimes it's ugly. And sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it's neat and silly, and sometimes you hate it, and sometimes you love it, and it doesn't matter. It's about the process. So I've put in some samples for you. This is about multimedia, but as we're starting with children, maybe it's just about crayon and marker. If you have supplies in your classroom, here's an example of my students who wrote I am poems. There's so much more. If you think about writing it on a piece of paper, it might be something that you would turn in. You might get an assessment, and then you'd hand it back, and what would you do with it? A lot of people would throw it away. But here is where it becomes a work of art, and it really shows who they are. I'm going to kind of fly through these here a little bit, but I want to show you some kid versions. Think about using stamps and collage and crayon. Maybe it's the beginning of a writing process. I'm sorry that I'm going to move a little faster here, but I want to really show you some of the content examples of journaling. So here we have kindergartners' science observational drawings. Again, a place where it stays in your journal. And when you're done, you end up with very thick, large, falling apart journals like this, where great and wonderful things happen. And ugly, messy things happen too. But it's a place where you can go back and reflect on. Here's science in 3rd grade and math in 3rd grade, where they were looking at triangles, they were studying biomes. Oops. Here we had 4th graders working on some math, solving problems, and this up at the top, this strategy is called slow journaling. So they took a quote from the book that they were reading and looked at that. 5th grade, multimedia. So as they're getting older and they can use more media, they've even included their QR codes for their technology readers where they can link to articles and things that they have been reading. Studies of the missions, the drawings, the scale drawings. Here's an example. Tessellations in math. Here's an example. And then here's what we were just doing. Think about this. They were studying the United States. They hand drew the map, which was amazing. And then they Zentangled each state. So as you're in the process of Zentangling, if you're thinking about being in California and you're looking at those, you can almost feel the what do I want to call them? I've lost my words. The earthquake lines, the faults. There we go.
Yeah,
the
fault lines.
So
I was going to show you real quick. It made me think of Frida Kahlo and her journals.
Yes.
That's neat. The master's studies her.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Frida Kahlo kept wonderful journals.
She's a good one.
And she's a great one to look at. Picasso kept journals. If we go into our nature journals, John Muir kept an amazing journal. James Audubon kept a journal. So it really is a process of life that many scientists and artists and explorers. Lewis and Clark had an amazing journal. So if we think about this idea of keeping our history and a log of our learning and our log of our growth, this is a great way to do it. Here you see kids here with their journals, just fully engrossed in acrostic poems. And if you wanted to go through, just like we were talking about, there are some great websites for nature journaling. I found one from Project Learning Tree. If you don't know it, is an amazing organization. John Muir Laws has a whole curriculum for teachers that is free. It's about nature journaling. The Sierra Club also has free lesson plans and ideas. So I've linked those. Cynthia, are they able to go back into the? They're able to go back into the slideshow. Yes.
Well, you know what? At the end, we could email them slideshow. We could just put it in the chat window, and that way everyone could have access to it.
Perfect, because I have a lot of links and everything else. We're kind of out of time, but we'll just end with this idea about nature journaling. And we know for a fact that many of our young people have nature deficit disorder, and it is a real life thing that people are studying now, and that we really need to help them connect to the world around us. It ties into so many issues of well-being and ecology and what is happening on our planet. So here's a great way that we as teachers can help them connect to nature through their journals.
Kristine,
and I really think I'm going to just take it to the last thing. We didn't get to talk about junk creations. Save all of your stuff and let them create puppets, machines, robots. Just let them create. And then I'm just going to quickly show you that we have lots of different resources here. So 3 pages of resources that I want you to be able to go back into. So Cynthia, we're going to post this so that they can go back in.
Actually, I have a couple things, Kristine.
Yes.
So if everyone who is here, if you want to just write your email in the chat window, I'll make sure you get a copy of that. We'll email you a copy of that. The other thing is, before you leave, if you could please make sure you fill out the survey. I just posted a link in the chat window. It's fullerton.qualtrics.com. We really want your feedback. We want to know what you want to hear about in our webinars. Last semester, someone really wanted an art webinar. So thank you very much, Kristine.
And here
we have an art webinar this semester. So
just like with my classes, the art webinar should be double time. It should be 2 hours.
Yes, it should. And so I do take the time to take a look at what you're posting in the surveys, and we do try to meet your needs. And the webinars are open to the entire community. So if you know any art teachers, or if you're part of a Facebook art group, or part of a teacher's Facebook, and you want to share with other people about the webinars, please do. We're happy. We could accommodate at least 1,000 people. So there's no real limit. And my last thing is, Kristine, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us this interactive art lesson. I haven't drawn in so long, and I was so happy to do that.
See, every once in a while, you just need to draw. So I hope that you all continue with that. I look forward to sending this PowerPoint to you so that you can use all the resources and all the links that are in there as well. And find some time, carve out some time to be creative yourselves, not just with your students, but yourself. Because really, unless you're experiencing it yourself, you won't understand the benefits of it for your students. So go forth and create.
Okay, one last question. Could I just ask about this, Kristine?
Yes.
Okay, so circle. Okay, there's my circle symmetry. I want to know how to explain circle symmetry. So to explain that to a student, I would be saying it means that you are repeating a pattern around a circle and sort of keeping, and it's hard to explain. How do you explain?
So when you look up to do more, to get more specific language of it, look up radial symmetry.
Radial symmetry. Okay.
And it really is, it's building a pattern around a center point so that it has, that no matter which way you turn it, it has symmetry.
Meaning the symmetry means it's the same on the other side no matter how you turn it. It repeats on the other side.
Yes. So,
Okay.
so you could put a mirror. You could put a mirror down the center.
Okay.
And this side's going to be this side. And you could change that mirror any way. We could put it this way or this way or this way or this way, and it's still going to be a mirror image.
Okay. I realized I broke the rule with my spiral in the center, so that wouldn't be symmetrical, but that's okay.
I'm going to say congratulations. I'm so glad that you broke the rule. That is the first step.
You want me to break the rule.
You're getting there already, Sue. I'm excited to see what happens.
Okay.
You're going to meet the masters all in a new frame of lens.
Yeah, really. They could just do what they want now. I decided.
No, but it's that extension, right? It's that what's the next step? It's how do we take these skills and now put them into our own creations?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't let go of Meet the Masters. It's a fantastic program.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Kristine. It was wonderful. I appreciate it.